Rachel, thank you. Great report. That is the case we're going to cover today, at least one of them. But let's talk a little bit more about it right now with Law and Crime trial analyst Jonna Spilbor. Jonna, great to see you.
Good morning again.
Sorry we have to talk about such a sad topic to begin with, but it's important for little Ada McClendon that we talk about this topic.
Yeah.
Now, people hate gangs, okay? Now, these two men
What's to like about them,
What's to
right?
like about gangs, right? So these two men have been alleged to be part of the PCE gang, Problem Child Entertainment Gang. Has a nice ring to it. They're alleged to have gotten into a beef with the 187 gang. They opened fire on 187 gang territory, and this 22-month-old baby was caught in the crossfire. Here's the problem, though. If you're sitting on that jury, you don't like gangs to begin with, and this is the problem. People don't realize it. Is it the idea that with gangs, obviously I don't know how much people lose sight of, they kill each other. You're like, whatever, it's gang violence.
Right.
But look who gets caught up in the crossfire of it.
Right. Well, you know, I don't know if this is so much a problem. And I'm going to just tell you right here and right now, when I was doing my research for this story, I teared up because when you read how this young child died, and I hope it doesn't happen again, it breaks your heart into a million pieces. And I think if I'm a defense attorney in this case, although I wouldn't want this case for love or money, you're going to have to, 12 people are going to know that there's a gang affiliation. Obviously, they know who the victim is and that the victim couldn't have been more innocent. Even if there's not, I'm going to say a jury might be inclined to convict and fill in gaps that is not fillable from the actual evidence because, Jesse, like you just said, we don't like gangs. I'm not suggesting that they should wrongfully convict anybody, but if you are going to err on the side of a conviction or innocence, you're probably going to err on the side of conviction in a case like this, even if you have to take a couple of leaps as a juror. That's just my opinion. I'm not suggesting they do it, but I think it could happen. Well,
when we talk about gangs, another unique aspect of this case is that some of the witnesses who've come forward can't be identified, right, out of fear for their safety. So yesterday, many of you will know that we couldn't show a lot of this in court because there was a protected witness, a gang member, who testified the entire day. We weren't allowed to live stream him. So what do you think about that? They're afraid they can't actually be identified, but they're still coming forward.
And so guess what? So now be a juror. Be a juror. So you can juxtapose what I just said, how they might be more inclined to get a conviction even if they have to take leaps with certain evidence or a lack thereof. And at the same time, they're going to say to themselves, am I in danger? If I convict, am I in danger of somebody driving by my house and shooting up me and my family? That is a real threat that I think goes through jurors' mind. It's something that the prosecution, most especially, is going to have to contend with.
And this is the case that we're covering, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to come back and talk about it. But before we do, I want to switch gears once again. You remember at the top of the program when I said we covered the top legal stories of the day? Well, guess what? Here on Law and Crime, we have our very special segment, the top crime stories of the day. Let's check it out right now. Wow. Anthony, thank you so much for those stories. I want to talk about that sucker punch case right now with Jonna Spilbor. I think I've lost faith in humanity. It's not bad enough he gets punched in the face, but then you have random innocent bystanders come, well, let me rephrase. Bystanders, don't even want to call them innocent, coming to take photos of him? Have you lost faith in human beings?
Well, I think the random bystanders were the ones who robbed him after he was unconscious and could have been dying on the pavement, and then the ones who knocked him out came back and took pictures of their accomplishment, and I put that in air quotes. It's disgusting.
What's going on?
And you and I were talking off there. Remember, there was like a spate of these. It's called the knockout game, right? There was a spate of these last year, maybe the year before here in New York City. It's disgusting. And what I want to make sure is that when they catch these guys, they should be charged not just with a felony assault, which is what they did, but they should be charged with attempted murder because you can break your back, break your neck, crack your skull, and any of those things can kill you. And then the icing on the cake is the disgusting way they come back and take pictures and rob this completely unconscious person. It baffles me. Where is humanity?
This was completely random?
Yes.
They had no connection to this guy. I mean, we don't know who they are, right? We don't know who these people are.
We believe it's completely random because if it's part of this, quote, knockout game, which it's not fun at all, that's the whole idea. You walk up to somebody who's completely unsuspecting, you knock them out, and usually that's pretty much it. These guys have the added bonus of robbing and taking pictures of this victim.
You know, look, this happened in New York City. You walk by on the streets of New York City, a lot of times you see people who are in really bad shape on the sidewalk. Some people walk by, some people help. But to see a guy laid out in the middle of the street, you don't call 911, you take his wallet and you take pictures of him? I mean, there's a difference between being a person who doesn't want to get involved in something and then taking extreme advantage. Shouldn't these people be charged?
Oh, yes, they should be charged. Now, here's the problem. How are we going to identify, the people who did this, who robbed him, who knocked him out? They're clearly on video, and there's even more video beyond this, Jesse, where you can see the face of the man who actually laid the punch, which is great. So hopefully at least he'll be caught and then roll on the other people. But they might not get everybody who participated in this. And whether you robbed him or punched him, they should be all equally charged.
What's the likelihood they'll actually get the two attackers?
Probably not good enough, unfortunately. But we'll see. You know, they'll match up those faces. They have a pretty clear picture of the guy who laid the punch.
Yeah.
A pretty clear picture of his face. If he's done anything before, then he's got a mugshot on file, and hopefully they'll figure out who he is.
I hate to ask you this, but I have to. How do you prevent this? If you're walking down the street, I know people are always texting, looking at their phone, they're not looking up. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but how do you prevent this from happening to yourself?
You know, Jesse, I think when you're a law-abiding citizen, you don't even think that anything like this is going to happen.
Right.
Somebody walks up to you, if I walk up to you and I'm asking you for directions, you're going to try to help me.
No, I'm going to walk in the other direction.
But if I'm one of these thugs, basically, and I'm planning to rob you and punch you in the face, you're not going to know what's coming. And that's how this crime works. It's disgusting. It really is.
Well, there's a way that you might, if you have information, this is what you can do. You can call NYPD's Crime Stoppers hotline. That's 1-800-577-TIPS. That's 8477. So that's 1-800-577-8477. If you have information, legitimate information about this attack, please call them. We have to stop this. We don't want to ever see this. And even though we're covering some really interesting stories here on Law and Crime, we don't want to talk about this. We wish we didn't have to report about this. So any information out there, please let Crime Stoppers know. And you can go to lawandcrime.com to learn a little bit more about the stories we discussed and some other stories happening today. Now, let's switch gears once more. As you know, as I talked about at the top of the program, we're covering a really bizarre case out of Wisconsin. A man who's been charged with meeting a girl online, taking her out one night and killing her. It's a nightmare story. And not just killing her, but strangling her and shoving her head into a lake. This is a really sick story. We have a short report explaining a little bit more of the saga of Daniel Tate. Take a look.
Law and Crime now takes you inside the trial of the 2017 murder of a teenage girl underway in Wisconsin. 20-year-old Daniel Tate's accused of choking and drowning 17-year-old Olivia McKay in Lake Michigan. The two had met online. Tate's alleged to have arranged to meet McKay in a park in Kenosha County, Wisconsin, along with a friend. After Tate killed her, prosecutors say, Tate and his friend put Olivia's body in the trunk of her car and dumped it in a rural area. Much of the state's argument in charging Tate comes from a confession of that friend, high school senior Jamari Cook, who claims he was there when Tate met with McKay and watched him murder her. Cook's expected to testify for the state, but the defense says he's not credible. Prosecutors say the defendant, Tate, had a history of choking women during sex and may call 3 witnesses who claim Tate choked them during consensual sex. Daniel Tate's charged with first-degree intentional homicide, hiding a corpse, and taking a vehicle without consent. I'm Dan Abrams for Law and Crime.
Very own Dan Abrams reporting about this bizarre and sad case out of Wisconsin. Want to talk a little bit more about that last part you heard of. Heard about Daniel Tate's propensity to choke women during sex? Well, yesterday the state called 3 ex-girlfriends of his. 2 said Tate either tried or did choke them during sex, while the 3rd woman said Daniel wanted to choke her, but she would never let him do it. Let's talk a little bit more about this, Jonna. What is the importance of this?
All right. So normally, you are not allowed to bring in what we call prior bad act evidence in order to prove the conduct on a particular occasion of a defendant. Normally, you're not allowed to do that. However, there are exceptions to every rule, and if these prior bad acts can show a common scheme or plan, then the prosecution is allowed to get that evidence in. This is precisely what's happening here. There was a motion in front of the judge in this case. The judge said, I'm going to allow the evidence that he attempted to choke a couple of other or 3 other women in his day because I think that shows MO, the modus operandi. And that's exactly why the judge is letting it in. And I think it's going to be compelling evidence, too.
Okay, so normally they wouldn't let it in because you have to say, hey, just because he did something bad in the past, you can't convict him.
Right.
Here's the problem, though. 2 of the women said they agreed to it. And also, just because he chokes women during sex, is that necessarily fair that he would choke a woman out in a murder case? And let's not forget the big thing that we can't forget here is that Jamari Cook was there. Jamari Cook is a very big man, and Jamari Cook could have easily done this as well. So is that fair?
I think it's very fair because the theory that the prosecution is going to try to float here is that, look, he invited this girl. His intention probably was to have sex. He met her on a dating app, for lack of a better word.
Did he, though? Did he really want to just have sex? Because according to Cook and investigators, he had a backpack with him with plastic surgical gloves and plastic bags. This is not a guy who's looking to have sex.
Well, look at it this way. Perhaps he was going to engage in other activity before he killed her. And in fact, you know, one of the theories could be if he's into this weird, rough sex, that something could have gone wrong and she died and then they covered it up. And I think if you engage in that kind of behavior, you probably know that something could go wrong if you're planning to choke out the person that you're planning to have sex with. And this Jamari Cook, he's a liar. He's got 0 credibility. So I don't think he's not going to persuade the jury as much as perhaps
You don't believe him?
defense might think he is.
You don't believe Jamari Cook?
No.
Well, I'll tell you what, Jonna. Stay right there. Don't go anywhere, okay?
All right.
I'm going to play some of the testimony of Jamari Cook, and you be the judge, and Jonna will be the judge, about is this man hiding something? Is he being truthful? Or even worse, is he the person that ultimately killed Olivia McKay? Take a look. That's Jamari Cook. Says he was there when Daniel Tate murdered Olivia McKay, but he didn't step in. Very bizarre. Jonna Spilbor. This guy comes as a third wheel on a date, walks away, goes, listens to some music, turns around, she's being killed, he doesn't do anything. Something doesn't feel kosher.
It defies logic, Jesse, you know, and the jurors are going to be able to use their common sense when deciding whether or not to assign any credibility to this guy. I mean, look, well, first of all, it's a little bit strange that he came as a third wheel. Second of all,
Bizarre. Who does that?
Well, you know, but they were kind of young, so who knows? But it also could mean that they were both planning to kill this poor girl. You're a guy. You see somebody, you see your friend taking the life of an innocent person who you just met, and you're sitting there basically filing your nails. It doesn't happen that way. Either he participated in it and he's testifying untruthfully to try to save himself, not uncommon, or, I mean, or he actually did it and he's lying to the jury to make it seem like the other defendant here is the mostly guilty party.
The prosecution is telling the jury to believe this story, though, and it should be noted that the defense is pointing the finger at Jamari Cook and saying that he was the one who had the opportunity to kill Olivia McKay, especially since he somehow knew her even before they all met up. He knew her from the area. Now, we are going to cover that case more later on today, but we are live right now in another case out of Florida. I mentioned it earlier in the program. This is the case of Kwame Richardson and Henry Hayes. These two men, these 2 alleged gang members, are on trial for gunning down a 22-month-old baby boy named Aiden McClendon. This poor young boy was caught in the crossfire of a drive-by shooting. We're going to go live right now into the courtroom. A new witness is on the stand. We don't want you to miss anything out of this case out of Florida. Actually, they're about to call a new witness, so we have a minute to talk. Great. Jonna Spilbor, let's talk a little bit more about this. What do you expect for the rest of this case? What is the defense going to do? Remember, there are 2 separate juries, 2 separate defense attorneys. They're not being represented by the same attorney. Do they just point the finger at one another?
Well, I think that could be part of the plan. The other part of the plan is they simply don't have solid ID evidence for any of these guys. You know, they're trying to take the testimony from other gang members that it could have been them, but, you know, in order for somebody to say, yes, it definitely was him, I think they had one witness who identified one of the defendants, but even that's questionable. So this could be a case of reasonable doubt, which is going to break my heart all over again if that's the end result and they don't get a conviction here.
Well, it's hard to know because when there's gunfire happening, it's really hard to make sense of what is actually happening. Okay, we have an officer on the stand. This should be good. Let's listen in live. Okay, everybody, this is an important witness. Christopher Poole from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. This guy pulled over the defendants in a red Tahoe, and what did he find in the car? He found a pistol, a Glock pistol, in the trunk. Now, Jonna, I'm here with Jonna Spilbor. I think this might have been the pistol that was used in the Aiden McClendon shooting. Is that what you're getting at, too?
Yeah, that would make sense, because this witness is basically connecting several dots for us, right? They either had an inkling that these people were involved in this shooting, and this is a great example of, you know, you can get pulled over for pretty much anything. It's very easy to have a vehicle and traffic law violation happening anywhere on your car at any time. That gave this police officer a legitimate reason to pull over this vehicle, and then he didn't need a warrant because he got consent to search it, and bam, there's perhaps the murder weapon.
And they're also tying them to the gang, right? So the defendants are members, or alleged members, I should say, of the PCE gang, the Problem Child Entertainment Gang. Well, if they're known hanging out with people at the PCE gang at the Buffalo Wild Wings, that also creates a tie. As I'm watching him, I can't help but think, how tough is it to investigate gang-related activity? That is not an easy job for this man, is it?
It's not an easy job, but on one hand, there is one aspect of it I think that the police are well versed in, and that is when something is going on and you're investigating a crime, sometimes you can get these witnesses to roll on each other because you're looking for evidence of one crime and you're finding evidence of another, and that's how you get these witnesses to roll over.
I know. It's not easy. Let's go back live into the courtroom again. This is Christopher Poole talking about pulling over the defendants. Okay, that's the end of the direct examination of Christopher Poole. I'm here with Jonna Spilbor. What would cross look like here? What are they going to try and get out of him?
You know, that's interesting. I guess probably not a whole lot. I mean, basically, the main evidence that this officer is testifying to is that a gun was found inside that car, period. And is that gun going to be connected to the crime?
Well, let's find out. Let's see what happens. The defense attorney is questioning him. Okay, there's a lot to talk about with this witness, Christopher Poole. Again, the officer that found the gun in a car that was driven by Henry Hayes, one of the defendants. Kwame Richardson was in there. But under cross-examination, Jonna, we learned some really interesting tidbits. What did you make of it?
One of the defense attorneys was really trying to get at this point. Did this officer simply pull this car over on a pretext? In other words, was it really a valid stop? And she's trying to insinuate, and she didn't quite get home with it, that it wasn't, that it was totally a pretext. Here's where I'm confused listening to this witness. What happened to the gun? He said he only issued the vehicle and traffic violation to the driver. Was it a legit gun? Was it a legal gun? Who owned the gun? What happened to the gun? You don't leave a gun in the back of a car when you stop somebody and you find a gun, even if you found it based on the consensual search granted to you by the driver.
And the gun, we just learned that, okay, it didn't have, what is this, extended magazine, which might have been used in the Aiden McClendon shooting, but as we just learned, magazines can be used on different kinds of guns. They can be interchangeable.
That's right. They're interchangeable. And since there are 3 or so occupants in the car, who owned the gun? You know, you can say they all constructively possessed it if you're going to charge somebody based on having that gun, but what happened to the gun? I don't think anybody was arrested after this stop.
Well, it's a difficult question to answer there, what actually happened to that gun. Maybe we'll learn a little bit more later. But, you know, one last thing as we wait to hear this next witness, you know, how much do people actually hate being cross-examined and being questioned about his job? He's an officer. He's like, did you do a thorough job? You do a thorough job, right? I could just sense how annoyed Christopher Poole was. And correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I mean, he was probably annoyed, but I'm going to be honest with you. That wasn't a slam dunk of a cross-examination by either defense attorney, so he fared well.
Okay, everybody, we are going to go live now into the courtroom. I believe this is a relative of Henry Hayes, one of the defendants in this case. So let's go live. This is Cynthia Hayes. Let's go live. Okay, everybody, this is a live feed. Cynthia Hayes, she is the defendant's sister, and she was in the car when the police pulled them over and found that gun. But we just learned what the conversation was in the car before the police pulled them over. Jonna, What did we learn from this conversation?
Well, we're getting closer to learning what happened to the gun. Here's what we learned. One of the passengers knew that there was a gun in the car, and when they got pulled over, they wanted to hide it from the police. So they handed it to, or told this witness to take the gun and put it in the floorboard, which tells me that they often use the space underneath the floor to hide guns, drugs, or other paraphernalia that they don't want the cops to find.
I'm pretty sure that's not a standard safety equipment feature of the vehicle, the red Tahoe. But
here's your spare tire. Here's where you can hide your guns and your drugs.
That's one way of looking at it. Let's go back live into the courtroom. You might be wondering what just happened. Well, one of the unique aspects of this case is that there are two juries, one for Mr. Hayes, one for Mr. Richardson. When there's going to be testimony about Mr. Richardson, the Henry Hayes jury goes away. Unique aspect, Jonna. You don't see that often in these kinds of cases.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if we've ever covered a case where there were two separate juries. Normally what you do is you sever two trials when there's going to be some sort of conflict between co-defendants so that they each get their own separate trial, two separate juries, but the juries aren't listening to each other.
But you save money by doing it in one courtroom, right?
Well,
this is a bit, come on, you're saving money here. I get what's happening. What do you think the conversation is that she had with Kwame Richardson? Again, actually, we'll find out right now. We're back live in the courtroom. Let's go. Welcome back. So that was an interesting piece of testimony. She was talking about the conversation that she had with the defendant, and when he learned that he mistakenly killed Ada McClendon in this drive-by shooting, he said, according to her, he threw his gun down and said that he was going to turn himself in. Jonna, if you're sitting on that jury, what would you think about that?
That's pretty compelling, right? I mean, especially coming from somebody who's allegedly a known gang member, having some sort of remorse that they didn't get the intended target, and that the target that they got was a 2-year-old toddler, you know, sitting in the back of a car. I mean, but did it happen that way? Did he turn himself in? I don't think so, but that is compelling evidence that he is the culprit.
Yeah, it should be noted that Ada McClendon, the intended target of this drive-by shooting, was his cousin. If we have a picture of Ada McClendon, want to show it again for our viewers in case you're just joining us. And even if you haven't, just take a look at that innocent boy who was gunned down in the middle of this drive-by shooting. What we learned yesterday was so much about gang culture and the rap videos between the 187 gang and the PCE gang. Why is that important for the jury to understand and trying to understand what happened to this young boy?
I think it is really disgusting, and one of the reasons why it's important is because, listen, part of the defense here is nobody intended to kill a 2-year-old toddler sitting in the back of a car.
Right.
But when you have rival gangs and you're intending to kill another rival gang member, you're already committing a felony, and in the course of that felony, a kid, this innocent little baby, gets gunned down and killed. I think it's important for the jury to know that this was not an accident. It was not an accident, to say the least. Nothing about it was.
It's a horrific situation. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, there's a lot more to discuss in this case. This is, again, the Buffalo Wild Wings footage. Super Bowl Sunday, packed house. The defendants, along with Cynthia Hayes, Henry Hayes' sister, were all there. Now, I'm here with Jonna Spilbor. We just heard testimony from two different witnesses saying they were at the Buffalo Wild Wings before they were all pulled over and a gun was found in their car. It's possible that gun might have been used to kill Ada McClendon. Why is it important that we see surveillance footage of this?
Well, it's going to back up. Remember, we had the witness that was the officer who pulled them over, leaving this place. It's going to back up his claim that, you know, he was looking for a particular person and he thought he saw that person walk outside of the Buffalo Wild Wings, and then sure enough, there was a vehicle and traffic violation on the vehicle itself, giving him reason to pull that car over.
Now, you know what's weird when you look at this? This happened in, this video I think was captured in February. But young Ada McClendon was killed in January. Isn't it amazing if these two men are the ones who actually engaged in the shooting and killed Ada McClendon, that they're just living their lives, going to Buffalo Wild Wings, nothing happened?
You know, I think,
hiding from police.
I think that's more common than we think. I think when you live in the gang culture, which fortunately you and I don't know anything about, other than what we hear and investigate ourselves, that's the way it is. That is your life. You know, you can kill somebody in 1 second, and the next second you're feeding your face at Buffalo Wild. I mean, it can happen that way.
Is that why the jury is being how should I say this, inundated with so much information about gang culture and the rap videos between the two rival gangs and what the beef was, what the history was, because it's a different world that they have to get into.
Completely, and it is very important, Jesse, because jurors always want to answer the question why. Whatever crime they're sitting on, they're tasked with coming to a verdict on. Why? And when you're dealing with a gang-related shooting, the why is because it's gang-related. There's no real motive. There's no ever a rhyme or reason. That is part of the culture, and it's horrible, and it's disgusting, and it exists, but the jury needs to know and kind of get inside the mind of a gang member.
It is such a sad case. You know, you try to make sense of it. I think you said it perfectly. You try to make sense of what's happening. Again, this is the Buffalo Wild Wings surveillance footage. It's capturing the defendants when they were pulled over, and that officer who testified earlier said he found a gun in there. Possible that gun could have been used to kill Aiden McClendon. And I think there were two guns, right, Jonna? So we learned from Cynthia Hayes that her brother said, hide this gun. She put it underneath the floorboards. But there was another Glock found in the trunk, and that's where they believe that might have been the gun that he used?
So I'm not so sure, Jesse, so I guess this will feather out in a little bit. I'm not so sure if there were two guns or whether the information is that, remember the officer said he did not lift up a floorboard. He didn't think it was necessary to lift up the floorboards. He found a gun in a basket. Now, I'm not sure whether there was one gun and the officer actually did lift up a floorboard to get it, or whether the witness who said it was under the floorboard wasn't being truthful, or whether there are two guns and the officer missed one. I'm sure we'll get more information on that as this case rolls along.
But the important thing to remember is that the gun, they said, did it have an extended magazine, which would be most likely the kind of weapon you would use in a drive-by shooting, the Aiden McClendon drive-by shooting. But here, they said, look, even if it didn't have an extended magazine, you can put it on and off. It's interchangeable.
Oh, yeah, they are interchangeable, and they could have easily, you know, the gun that they found in the car could have had a different magazine than the gun that was used during the actual shooting.
Yeah. So again, this is the footage. I want to just let our viewers know one thing. We're keeping a very careful eye on another case. I'm watching it right now. It is that case out of Wisconsin, the Daniel Tate case, the man who's charged with the murder of Olivia McKay, this guy who is charged with meeting her online, met this girl online, lured her out one night, had his friend with him, was sort of fooling around with her, and then all of a sudden strangled her and killed her, dunked her head into Lake Michigan. That is what the account is put forward by the prosecution. We're carefully monitoring this case. It's a bizarre tale. We believe that closing arguments will start today. We'll let you know. And again, it's going to be up to the jury. Do they believe that Daniel Tate is the one that committed this crime? Or do they think that it's Jamari Cook, Daniel Tate's best friend, who was with him on the night of the murder? I want to ask you one quick question about that, Jonna. So we saw surveillance footage yesterday of both of them driving Olivia McKay's car after she died. And where did they go? They went to the hospital where Daniel Tate's girlfriend gave birth. She had the baby. Oh my gosh.
Just when you think a case can't get any weirder, that adds just another level.
That's
of
them.
Weird.
That's them. Okay, so you see them. Amazing.
Acting like, listen, do they look like they just killed an innocent teenager?
No, they don't.
No, they don't.
Why are they driving her car? Did they think, and here's the thing, they didn't know that they were going to be captured on surveillance footage at a hospital?
You know what? This is what we call felony stupid, Jesse. I don't think they were thinking 3 steps ahead. Although this does kind of, the one witness said, well, the reason he did this is because he wanted to flip the car. So maybe it adds a teeny tiny bit of credibility to Mr. Cook's.
In other words, that they killed her to get money for the car.
To get the car so they could flip the car, they could sell the car and get a quick buck.
I guess we're all trying to figure out what happened there, and we're going to let you know as soon as we have a live feed. We're going to go back. The judge is instructing the jury right now. But let's go back now to the Henry Hayes, Kwame Richardson case, the 22-month-old baby murder case. I think we can go back live. Cynthia Hayes is back on the stand, so let's go. Well, as I said, one jury will go out, another jury will stay when there's critical information that's being elicited from a witness. Now, Cynthia Hayes, what did we just learn? We learned a little bit more about what happened on the time that she was pulled over with her brother. But, Jonna, we also learned some very interesting things about her incentive to testify, and her statement about knowing that the gun was in the car is different today than when she gave the sworn statement back in March of 2016.
Right. So here's where one of the defense attorneys, they both probably will, go in for the kill to this witness's credibility. In other words, they're going to, and with just a few simple questions, they'll wrap this up in closing argument by saying, here's why you should not believe this witness, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. She gave one sworn statement under oath in this case, and then she sat here in front of all of you, looked you in the faces, and gave another statement. So is she lying now? Was she lying then? It doesn't matter. You shouldn't believe her testimony.
And she's providing some pretty incriminating testimony against her own brother.
Yeah.
Speaking of family, she had a baby while in jail.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it didn't, because I think her exposure, meaning the potential length of time that she could have been incarcerated was many, many years. So whatever she did to get herself there had to be pretty bad. And the fact that she was pregnant when she was sentenced didn't sway the judge in her whatever case that was.
Well, if she's testifying against her brother, and this is going to make the holidays very awkward. You know, this is a very precarious situation for the Hayes family.
Unless she's successful, in which case he'll be spending the rest of his holidays behind bars.
Well, we also saw this video. I mean, we didn't get a chance to see it. We heard it. I think it was Henry Hayes rapping, and he had a bunch of guns with him. It might have been in their house. Why is that important for the jury to know?
Well, if they're making a connection between Henry Hayes and the murder weapon and Henry Hayes and his gang affiliation, I think that goes to that sort of evidence.
Okay, we have a feed back in the courtroom. Let's go live. Okay, we're switching out again. The juries are being switched out again. You're going to see that a lot in this case. I'm warning you. I've warned you. I'm warning you again. Here with Jonna Spilbor. So want to talk a little bit more about her testimony. They're getting the flavor that she said she'll do anything to avoid going back to prison, which if you're sitting in the jury, what does that tell you?
All right, so the anything means, you know, would she lie to avoid going back to prison?
That's perjury.
But if, you know, surprise, surprise, if you're a prosecutor, you can rehabilitate this witness a little bit because, look, we talked about this a minute ago. This is a gang culture. This involves a gang culture in a heinous, heinous crime. The prosecution's going to say, look, everybody has their price. She didn't need to tell the truth before. She needs to tell the truth now, or else she is going back to prison. So you could swing it the other way. I hope that's what the prosecution.
Well, I know where we are going. We are going back live into that courtroom. She is back on the stand. Cynthia Hayes, the sister of the defendant.